Ring, ring! It's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep on the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have three friends with me. Our first friend, the engaged one, Luke Lewis. Hello.
Howdy, gamers. How we doing?
We're good. We're here to talk about some not video games, but more on that in a second. First, I'll introduce the sneaker savant, Joseph Hooper.
What up? What up? Rocking the official Crossplay merch here.
Where can you buy that?
As you can see, nowhere. This is one of one. Actually, one of two.
If you would buy it, though, DM me, and then we can get a kind of a gauge check if people would actually pay for merch.
I mean, you can buy one person's merch on this call. That is Gaming's Tribal Chief, our special guest for today, Asa Greenriver from Borderline Entertainment. Throw it up for Asa. Hello.
Let's throw it up. How's it going, everybody? I'm happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Tell us about yourself before we dive in and talk about video games and board games today.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with a little bit of begging, if you don't mind.
Beg away.
I'm going to beg away. I love podcasting. I love podcasting, especially with friends. So if you got content, put me on it. I need something to do. My rig is going to be really messed up because everything's held together with zip ties and duct tape, but I still got a good voice. And the people tell me they want to hear it. But anyways, I used to make content, and that's why I bring that up, called Borderline Entertainment on youtube.com/Borderline Entertainment, twitch.tv/Borderline Entertainment. You can find me personally on, I guess you can find me on X. I'm just not there very much, but you can find me on BlueSky.
Hell yeah.
A Greenriver 07. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure you'll find my face. I don't know. And then on TikTok, A Greenriver 07. That's where you can see me. There is still content up there, so if you want to go and see the greatness that I have put out, you can do that. And then if you want to stay up with me currently, I think BlueSky is probably going to be the best way to go. As long as I can overcome my anxieties, you will hear the random thinkings that I go on.
And on your TikTok, you're actually sharing your journey of designing a board game, which we are going to talk about later in this episode.
Yeah.
This episode is about board games. But before we get into the board games, Asa, thank you for being here.
Yes.
We're going to talk about video games briefly. One special note, Crossplay Conversations has a very cool thing. Shout out to our friends at the Indie Game Awards. We are going to be jurors for the first annual, hopefully, Indie Game Awards. So you can check out all that info at indiegameawards.gg. Tons of different games nominated. The show itself takes place on December 19th. So with that, I give you our programming for the next 2 months. We are not going to do a show for a couple of weeks. Our next show is going to be on Tuesday, December 17th, where we're going to break down the TGAs and talk and have a little end-of-year conversation. Then some or all of us are going to do a live react to the Indie Game Awards. Exact timing for that to be released, we'll let you know, but it'll be between the 19th and Christmas on the 25th. And then our big Game of the Year show with Claire Helmberger, our two-parter, will launch in January, so prepare your butts for that. Any notes on the Indie Game Awards, boys?
No, I think you nailed it. Super excited. Some really great folks included. Friends of the show, Wholesome Games, The Indian Former, Minmax, Spawn on Me, Giant Bomb, like really rad crew of folks putting all this together and excited to be involved. So
it's going to be fabulous. But listen, today's not an episode about video games. Today we're talking about board games. And we're just going to have an intro to board games conversation because we've never done that on this program. And that's why we brought Asa here today, because he is designing one. So I'll open it up with an icebreaker question. Today's icebreaker is, what is the best card or board game to kick off an evening of gaming? Asa, I feel as our guest today, you have to be the first one to give us one or two options of an icebreaker board game.
Absolutely. You know what? I think there's I think there's no wrong answer to this. I'll give a few. I think one really great one is called Wits and Wagers. I think Wits and Wagers is a great way to get into the deeper tabletop scene without jumping like head on into Catan or Ticket to Ride or something like that, where there's a lot of moving pieces and parts, but it's different enough from games like Monopoly or, you know, something
Trivial
like that.
Pursuit.
Trivial Pursuit, Candyland, you know what I mean? Like there's I'm not going to say childish, but the more jovial, lighthearted board and tabletop games, which is great for like the whole family. But if you want something that kind of squeezes your brain a little bit more, Wits and Wagers is a great one. If you want something more traditional but gets you into the role playing aspect a little bit, I think Clue is one of those staples in the industry that is. You see it pulled into a lot of different spaces, like Magic the Gathering just did a collaboration with Clue earlier this year. And then if you want something, if you've played Clue, you're like, Asa, what are you doing? You're giving me some cheap shots here. Check out Last Night on Earth. It's a close favorite of mine, especially if you love zombies. It's great. You're basically a group of survivors trying to get all the pieces that you need to start your truck as zombies are coming for you. You're playing as these like tropey characters. You can find all of the different things that you would expect, like a chainsaw and a baseball bat to defend yourself. Meanwhile, there's a counter going on. Can you last the night? The Last Night on Earth, can you escape? So it kind of takes some of those aspects of Clue, and then more advanced, I guess I would say, tabletop mechanics and throws it in there. And those are a couple of good ones that I would suggest people start with.
And Last Night on Earth, because I've not heard of that one. Obviously, Wits and Wagers is like, hey, a question is asked, you decide what your answer is going to be, and then people bet on which answer in the spectrum of answers is closest to the real answer.
Yeah.
But Last Night on Earth, how long does that take to play, and how many players?
So I think 2 to 4 I think being the best time that you're going to have. And then as far as how long it takes, it really depends on, I guess, the experience level with tabletop gaming. So if you've got a group of newbies, you've never played anything, but you're taking me at my word, I would say you're looking at a good hour to sit there, get used to the rules, everybody kind of work out the kinks. But if you've got some experienced players, I think the fastest I've ever played, and this was, I don't know why we were trying to like really escape the night, was like 25 minutes. And that was at very brisk pace. Like no holding hands. We're just going.
So Last Night on Earth, Clue, and then Wits and Wagers.
Yeah.
Three good ones to start with.
Yeah.
Luke, do you have a good icebreaker game?
Sure. I think I kind of consider myself a board game novice when it comes to this category of, I really enjoy board games. If I go to someone's house or, a public bar or cafe where a friend is like, I love board games, let me shepherd you through this experience. I love that. It's the best. But I'm not like in the know, if that makes sense. So one that I discovered at the recent PAX West from friend of the show, Roger from Gamerheads, he recommended a game called Change My Mind that is really fun. It's really pretty simple and it's very approachable, and you can play with a variety of players, and a round can last as long as 5 minutes or longer depending on how you choose to approach it. So it's a very conversational game. So each person gets a card of 5 pop culture things that they then have to rank, and then one person is the designated, I forget the term in the game, but like the main person that you're trying to convince your ranking is right. And so then you're arguing back and forth to try to get the person who's in the hot seat, so to speak, to align with your ranking. So the test round we did at PAX that was really fun was all sci-fi movies. So we're arguing between like Mad Max Fury Road and Avatar and Alien, and I think it was Terminator, like what was our favorite, and then ranking and then arguing back and forth. But it gets even sillier. Like some of the other example questions that I've seen is like, what is the most like soup? And then the 5 things are like the ocean, cereal, tomato bisque, like all these different things. And so it gets really silly. It gets really lighthearted, but I like how approachable it is. And it's something that I think there's sometimes a barrier with board games in terms of like knowing what each piece does or knowing what your different resources does. But this is like something that like I could play with like my 80-year-old grandmother or my young cousins or, friends and family alike. So it's a good one. We're coming up on the holiday season. It's a good one to bust out. And the base game is only $25 and it has dozens of different cards and variants and fun things. So Change My Mind is that one.
Love. There's 4. Hoopman, what do you got to throw onto the pile?
Yeah, I'm a big social deduction type of guy. I like kind of doing a little deceiving and whatnot. So one that I know a lot of people like is Coup. It's pretty simple. You just have, a handful of coins and you get assigned a character or two characters, and you can only do certain actions. So, but nobody knows your character. So, it's a little bit of deceit if you want to be of like, hey, I have these characters, but I'm going to pretend I really have these characters. And if somebody calls you out and they're wrong, they put risk to themselves. So it's a really fun game. Or you could play strategic and not lie and still maybe come ahead. Another social deduction one I like is called Avalon.
Yeah.
Avalon's real good.
Yeah, you basically have, it's kind of like Werewolf in that you have like a team of bad guys, and they have certain abilities and whatnot, and then you have your squad of good guys, all based on the characters from like the Arthurian tales, or like the Knights of the Round Table type mythos. And it's pretty fun because like you have certain characters that can see certain things, like Merlin, and he knows who the bad guys are, but if the bad guys guess who he is, then they win. So you have to be discreet in how you direct the conversation. I really like that game, and it's not too hard to ramp people up on. I know there are a lot of people that don't like social deduction games because they're either bad at lying or it just makes them uncomfortable or whatever. For those people, Codenames, I think, is a great game that I feel like a lot of people warm up to really nicely. Like very easy, kind of like not like a guess who type game, but it's very strategic, team based, and you can play with like, you can play with two people working together on a team, or you could play up to however many people split down the middle with your different teams. So those are my intro games, I would say, that don't take too long to explain the rules, but also pretty fun to get going.
Love it. I'm going to throw one on the pile here, and it's actually one that I discovered recently at a past PAX, and that's Chicken. Chicken is a dice game. Hootman, I know I'm speaking to your craps sensibilities.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But essentially, with this one, it's a great starter game because you roll different sets of dice, and on the dice, and for those video watchers on the YouTube channel, you can see the dice that I'm holding. But essentially, some of them have eggs on them, some of them have chickens on them, and then some of them have foxes on them. And essentially, your goal is to get the most number of points, essentially hatching the eggs into chickens, while not getting foxes that will run your turn. And the different colors of dice, white, yellow, and orange, essentially give you more chances at chickens, but more chances of essentially busting out. You pass around the cup and you add the different levels of dice as you go until someone busts, and then you bring it back to the white dice, and then you hatch, and it's a circle. Chicken's rad, and it's a game that you can play once you know how to play it in like sometimes 10 or 15 minutes. So just like the perfect sort of game to start off your game night.
10 or 15 minutes playing till you bust, huh?
Yeah. Oh. What are we talking about here? Board games? Got it.
Crazy.
On that note, let's sort of move on to the next part of the conversation here and just talk about, some of our favorite games beyond the Icebreakers. What I'd love to know first is, like, I know some of you talked briefly about your board game involvement over the years. Luke, you're sort of a novice. Joseph, you like social deduction games. Asa, you're working on your own game. We'll start with you. Like, what is your involvement with board games? And like, has it been more over time, less over time? Tell me.
Yeah, it's kind of gone in spurts, especially as somebody with severe ADHD. Once I get that hyperfixation, we're going to be playing one game all the time. But I grew up with the very base games that everyone knows. Talking about Monopoly again, something like that. I played a lot of Stratego, Risk, growing up with my buddies in high school. But looking, in my life as an adult, I also played a lot of like D&D, Pathfinder, Shadowrun. So getting into the RPG side of things. And so I really started to like kind of dive into anything and everything. There was this show back in, I want to say 2012, called Tabletop, hosted by Will Wheaton. And that was such a great entry point for me to learn about so many other games. And it was around that time where I learned, there are so many more tabletop games than what I know myself. And that really spawned a love. So like every once in a while when I'm going to pick up some Magic cards or something like that, or popping over to the role-playing shop, I'll just check out the board game section, the tabletop section, just like, what catches my eye. And I'm always surprised to see not only like the wide variety, like thinking about something like Wingspan is like one that always catches my eye. And I finally pulled the trigger and tried it out. What was that other one? There was another one that I just really enjoyed. Or even, you talked about being at PAX, hanging out with Scott. We all know Scott,
Scott White.
Scott White, and Scott and I would just love to try, different board games that are happening there. And you're starting to see like more video games kind of getting their own adaptation. There's a great Bloodborne one. I know Elden Ring is in development.
Sonic's got a good one.
And they range from being card based to dice based to more piece strategy based. And so the love has always been there. Sometimes I'm heavier in it than I am video games and vice versa. But there's always something that I'm playing, even as a developer. I hate kind of being siloed in my thoughts when I'm developing something. So I especially like to go and try new games. And I'm in a few communities where we, talk about our ideas, and I'll have somebody give me a rundown, like, what is your thought process behind your game? Just so, I'm like, okay, so maybe my idea that I've been stuck on for so long isn't as fresh as I thought it was, So I realized that was all the way around your question. But that's how I roll.
Love. I want to ask you, I'll just do it now and ask you sort of a follow-up about what then inspired you to, create your own game. And then sort of, can you tell us a little bit about the game? Because I know it's out there in alpha, so it's maybe
yes.
You tell me what. I know you don't want to say the whole thing because people be stealing them ideas.
People do be stealing them ideas.
Yeah,
people
but I'd love to know kind of where you're at with that.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, TikTok is a place where you can go to kind of stay along with the journey. There's only 2 entries into that journey because I am how I am. But so you can hear this story there, but I'll reiterate it. Some of how I got started into making my own game. I was one of those kids that was always making stuff up. Mm-hmm. Like I have always been somebody I'm bored with what we have. Let's just make up a game. And I worked at a summer camp for a long time. I worked as an administrator in education, and part of working with kids is like keeping them entertained because they've got short attention spans, just like myself, and they get bored so quickly. So, there was plenty of times during the summer, and this is back, I started developing this game in like 2016-ish, I believe. But there are, tons of days in summer camp season where we have calamity days and everybody's stuck inside. You can't go anywhere. And the kids were just sick of everything that we had, no card games, no chess, no checkers, nothing. And so I just started like, all right, I got a new game for you all. Let's get around the table and let's play. And I just started making it up on the fly. And everybody was having so much fun that at the next calamity day, and even in non-calamity days, I would have counselors coming up to my office saying, Asa, what was that game that you're playing? Because these kids are asking to play it. And I'm like, shit, I don't know. I have to like go back into my brain and like think about it. And so then I started like writing down the rule set, and then starting like tinkering with it. And there were, in one of my D&D groups, a handful of the people that were playing worked at the camp as well. And they're like, hey, have you all seen the game that Asa was just coming up with? And so we started playing that before we would do our campaigns. And then that just kind of like has been the thing. And so I've just always been tinkering with it, but it took a great conversation with my cousin, Derek Fields. Shout out to Derek, wonderful game developer as well. And Derek was like, just get serious. You got something good on your hands. Like, let's dive in. So I'm a one-man squad and I'm doing it myself. So it's taken a long time. And the big difference between, I think, video games, there's a lot of differences, but a big difference between video games and tabletop games is the physical aspect. Like I can't jump on Blender and make a lot of quick assets for my game. Like I have to find somebody with a good 3D printer who can help then make good schematics for me. And then we print out the pieces or, build everything out. So there's a lot more barriers, I think, in that regard, that I think are kind of slowing things down. But that's kind of like the history behind it and like how I kind of came to this point now. But to then talk about the game, to to your point, like where I'm not giving too many details, it is a multiplayer strategic last team standing battler. um, Being a huge video game fan, I wanted to make this tabletop game feel like a video game in the way that it plays. And I also wanted it to be very accessible for people like Luke, who, you don't play a lot of tabletop. So I didn't want an excessive amount of rules. I didn't want all of these different moving pieces and parts to where, like, like that kind of like overwhelming state where you open up a box and you're like, what the fuck am I about to play right now?
Gloomhaven. Oh my
yes,
god.
Yes. All great game.
Great game.
But so
Not
overwhelming
for the
to
faint of
get
heart.
started. No. And so I wanted something that when you took it out of the box, it is going to be simple. Everything is right there. It's really easy. So you have the board, you have your team, you have your dice. And that is the base game right there. There are a few other key components that I have been working on since PAX West. We did a big pull there. Had some people playing it that changed things up, that do kind of add those extra things. But similar to Magic the Gathering, there's different ways to play. Like you can play base game. You don't need the equipment. You don't need the heroes. Or, well, okay. So that's the two things that I will be adding is hero units and equipment. But you don't need those to play the game. Those are things that are enhancements. And those are additional game modes that you can do later on. But the base game is just right there. And you've got 4 factions at the jump. You've got military, ninjas, pirates, zombies. Staples in gaming and everything like that. But each team has a set of abilities, passive, active, and ultimate. So it's going to feel very much like an Overwatch or something like that, where you're kind of, when am I going to do these abilities? Your passives kind of happen all the time. Your actives you can do on your turn or someone else's turn. Your ultimates are like a big devastating attack that can change the course of the battlefield. And then you've got the whole table politics situation where it's kind of like, do I want to team up with Jacob because we want to take everybody else out? And let's have a truce. And then at the very end, it's going to be just the two of us, so like I wanted it to have a lot of like freedom involved, but also just like really fun. So like, I think the first round that we played at PAX West was probably around 40 minutes ish off the top of my head. But I've done super quick ones and I've done really long ones. It just depends on how much strategy you want to put into it. And I guess how distracted everyone can get as well, because like I said, it can be a very high level, super easy game to jump in. But once you like really dive into the strategy and decide, when do you want to use your active abilities, that could kind of, change the course of the game. So
if anyone doesn't have any questions, I want to jump in. No questions.
I have one follow-up question. I'm curious just about kind of like your ideation and how you came up with the gameplay process. Like, what came first in terms of like the thematic structure of the game versus like this is how the player is going to physically move on the board? Like,
yeah,
how did you approach kind of like the nuts and bolts mechanics of designing a board game?
Yeah, so the very first the very first iteration of the game was I took a checkerboard, which is still the same checkerboard that I use now. And I took red checker pieces, black checker pieces, and then black chess pieces and white chess pieces. And those were the teams. And I was like, all right, we each have a corner. And it was just kind of everything was on the fly. I was like, let's do 4 people at a time. Everybody can circle around and watch. And I was just kind of making it up. So the first thing that I just jumped to was, how do I make each team feel fun? Because what we're looking at are discs and then chess pieces. And if you are 8, 9 years old, you don't care, like that stuff doesn't really stand out to you and it's not interesting. So it all started as somebody who's been a DM in D&D. I was like, oh, no. Just imagine you all are pirates. you're just really these dirty sea dogs, and you guys are zombies, and you're just oozing pus and blood, and you all are ninjas, and you're just like cutting throats and kagebunshu nijitsu. You're doing Naruto stuff, and so I just like my imagination just kind of started exploding. And so it was kind of, that's why I say like it all just kind of happened at once and was all happening at the same time. And so that's kind of like how it came to be. Like once it came to like actually fleshing things out, I would say I started with the thematic pieces first. All right, these are the teams. This feels good. This is interesting. How do I make the zombie team, when you play as the zombie team, I want you to feel like y'all are zombies. So like, what does that mean? It means you can die really quickly, but your opponents have to worry about crowd control because you can spread the virus. Like, so I want you to feel, so like, and then the hive mind ability of being able to like take your roll, but then split it between all of your different zombies. So like if you roll a 6, you don't have to put that 6 towards one piece. You can move 6 pieces one time and just kind of get that feeling of like the horde is encroaching around another team and there's no way out. So I definitely, pulled a lot of, from a lot of things that I love. So like, I'm a huge zombie person. So like, I wanted the feeling of like Resident Evil 1, where like, I wanted the other teams to feel like they're Jill or Chris stuck in the mansion and they're just kind of, they have to always watch their back. And then for, like the military, I wanted it to feel like the Diamond Dogs. I wanted it to feel like Outer Heaven. Like I wanted to feel like this group of militia. They've got, no nation, and they're just using all of their firepower at will, but they are a tactical squadron. They're moving together. They have a lot more coordination amongst themselves. So you'll see a lot of like the reinforcement ability of like pulling somebody in when someone else dies, or the squadron. So when you move, if you've got 2 pieces, they're going together. And I watched a lot of dev diaries, like specifically thinking about the military one. I watched more specifically the dev diary from Hideo Kojima, shout out, huge influence, when he was making Metal Gear Solid 2. And he talked about how for motion capture, he wanted it to look as realistic as possible. So he worked with these SWAT units and everything like that to make sure that everything was like really accurate. And so I wanted to have that feel as well. So I kind of pulled some of those and tried to put that as best as you can, in a tabletop experience.
I'm curious. So I think when I play a tabletop game that I really enjoy, and you start to kind of like you said, you want to play it all the time, right?
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I start to notice is like certain balancing things where it's like, oh, this character is broken, or oh, this is the strat to go to. How do you think about that when you're like designing, like as you see people playing, or like maybe start to cheese with some certain ability? Like, how do you handle that?
Man, balancing is so hard. It is, because you don't want to nerf something to where it's not fun anymore, but you want every single team to feel like they're the most powerful team in the world. And so like, for example, and this also comes from, play testing, getting feedback from players. How was that for you? Did you feel overpowered? Like, for example, Jacob, you gave me a lot of great feedback for the zombies. And so I kind of pulled them back a little bit. So now it's more of a success roll to get another unit versus it just happens automatically. So that's a big thing. But when I'm developing myself, I've got a lot more factions that are cooking right now that are bringing a lot more to the table, that I'm like, okay, so if I'm introducing, what am I saying? I don't have a legal team. It's just me. I'm working on a faction right now. And they are, I'll just say, like, I've got Terminators. They're not actually Terminators because I don't own that IP, but essentially AI controlled robots.
They're automatons.
That's
There you
not
go.
trademark. Yeah.
TM. It is now. Sorry.
So automatons are going to feel really overpowered to a lot of people, but I am trying to balance it in a way that, like I said, like it's not over. So basically I'm playing with myself. Yeah. I'm playing
Pause.
with myself.
Uh-huh.
I'm not afraid. And I'll keep playing until it feels good. And, I do run it through some simulations. And I think, like when it comes to like the automatons, I also want it to feel like Terminators, right? Like that's my key philosophy is everything should feel like what it's inspired by. So you just feel like this badass, unstoppable robot from the future. And so like when you hit a Terminator automaton, a robot, when you hit it one time, if you win that dice roll, it does not destroy them. It puts them into crawling mode. So now they have to roll higher to move, and they don't have ranged anymore. They can only do close quarters combat. So it's that, it's that Terminator 1 where they thought they won, but now the skeleton is crawling towards them because it just won't stop. So I wanted it to feel coordinated like the military, but overwhelming like the zombies. But then how do I make it so everybody doesn't want to just play that and it's overpowered and everyone else has fun? So, without, I don't know why I gave you all that, but play testing is the biggest thing. And if you're a friend of mine, just know that you're probably going to be an automatic play tester when things are coming out. So
what's the biggest hurdle to kind of getting your game out in the market? Because I know that you're probably in the play testing, tweaking phase. But is there something that like getting into it, you had no idea to be like, man, that's going to cost $1 bajillion. How do I proceed?
Yeah. That's it. Money is the biggest thing, because the base game and the base factions, all of that, it's pretty much been done. Like I've done 3 play tests since PAX West, or I guess including PAX West. And out of all of those play tests, there hasn't been drastic changes that would have halted production. They've been very small, minor ones, because everything else has like, it's a well-oiled machine. So money has been the biggest thing. Can I get funding to create the board? Because my vision for the board is to pull from Halo. I want you to be able to do big team battle if you want. You can have a standard board, but let's say you've got 4 friends and you want something bigger and everybody brings their game. I want it to feel like a classic LAN party where you bring in your shit to your friend's house, and now you're clicking together all of your boards and you've got a massive battlefield. And you can either play with the same size 10-piece army, or you can double it up to 20, or whatever you want to do to just like capture these big epic feels. But you need money to do that. A key function obviously is the piece itself, like the pieces for each faction. Some of them are going to be ranged units, some of them are not, and that needs to be a distinction in the piece. The base is going to show its cone of vision, to like pull more from stealth games like MGS. Like for your backstab, like you need to make sure that you are behind that cone of vision. That has to be in the base. So like all of these different things cost so much money. So like now really that's the big hindrance to getting the base game out is, can I get funding? Can I get a publisher? I would love to self-publish, but that's even more money to get it going. So the plan is, and I don't know if this is the time to say that, but January 1, 2025, the plan is to launch Kickstarter to hopefully at least get the base game out to at least a limited number of people. And so if that can happen and success can come from that, then I can hopefully get more funding, maybe do another Kickstarter to do everything else. Because I've got, there's 4 in the base game, 4 factions. I've got 20 others that I'm currently developing at this given moment, to show the longevity for those publishers, to try and pull in their funding. Like, we're going to get money later on down the road. And then there's the extra things like hero units and equipment cards. That is going to drastically change the way that the game plays and feels. And that's stuff that I'm hoping to add later on. But first, we have to get the base game out. And I say we because anybody who loves me, your love and energy keeps me going. So it always feels like a collective experience.
Spirit Bomb-esque, if you will.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure to share out the information when you launch that Kickstarter on Crossplay. So folks who have heard this episode and they're like, "That Asa guy, when's his game?" We'll make sure and show that out so folks can see it. Any other points you want to cover on kind of your journey, your board game, or should we talk shop about some of our faves?
Let's talk shop.
Love
Because I could talk all day, but I want to hear from everyone else. Let's talk shop.
Love it. So I think for the rest of the game, the rest of the episode, we're just going to talk through some of our favorite board games and maybe assemble the ultimate evening of board gaming. So maybe from there, either Joseph or Luke, I'd love to hear from you. Some of your favorite games that you haven't talked about yet, because we're building the ship. We're building a great game night.
Yeah. And by the way, for the video watchers, I am eating trail mix because I am quite hungry right now. So if it's not going to trail mix, I apologize. But to answer the actual question, I think there's a balance, right? I think every seasoned board game player or enthusiast knows, right? Depending on your group, right, that you're playing with. You might have some friends in town who don't really play board games and you're trying to find something to do. You're going to play with them versus the crew you play with every weekend or whatever. There's different levels. Like one of my favorite games that I've only played a few times because there's so many damn rules to set up, Betrayal. Like people know Betrayal, House on the Hill. I think it's fantastic. It's very intricate and fun as it develops on, where you have it's almost kind of like Dead by Daylight in a way, where you have like a monster that everybody's trying to avoid while you collect, the MacGuffins or whatever to win the game. And it's very Lovecraftian. So there's like madness and everything that people can get inflicted by, but there's a lot of setup. Like there's a lot of rules, and especially for people who have never played a game like this before or anything like that, it does take, it could probably take 20 minutes to get everybody through the rules. So that's one where I say, hey, if you guys are in it for the long haul, if you guys have a board game night and people are kind of down to clown, I feel like that's a really great one that I love to pick up. And obviously like classics, I think Asa mentioned before, Ticket to Ride, Catan, same deal. Like those are classics. They sound like games that everybody already knows at this point, but that's not the case, right? They still have a handful of rules that you kind of have to ramp people up to. On the like more casual side, I definitely like kind of like the viral Exploding Kittens is a very quick game to play, very easy to play, and doesn't really take that much brain power. I would say like Super Fight, although you need to have the right crew to play that. It's very much like
you gotta have good like cultural and like entertainment knowledge.
Yeah. It's kind of like Cards Against Humanity for nerds, essentially, where you're just kind of pitting random characters against each other and arguing who would win in a fight, and you kind of have to be down to clown to play with that one. But there's not a lot of rules. You kind of just make your own rules. So I would say like those are a few. Like I definitely have a lot of board games over there that I can double back to. But Luke, as the self-proclaimed novice, do you have any that you enjoy to be introduced to, or that are your go-tos with you and Claire?
Sure. Yeah, I think probably the biggest go-to in our family group is one that's been mentioned, Settlers of Catan. I feel like that was like okay, let's level up from a Monopoly. Let's play something a little more tactical. I think it was Claire's younger brother who got super into it with his college friends, and he came back from college for a Christmas break and introduced it to everybody, and we got super into it. And that was like 4 years ago, and now it's like every holiday break it's like, all right, what night are we doing the tournament, the gauntlet? And it's gotten pretty intense over the years, and it's a fun one to get a little more strategic and now that I've played a lot of times now, I have some different strategies, some different approaches, and so things like that I find are really fun. I do like going back to the classics though, of like Scrabble or Bananagrams. I love a good word game, especially with my mom. She's a big reader, and so that's a fun, like, relaxing one just to do after a nice dessert on a holiday evening. trying to think of other ones. This is like a staple of anyone's household, but Trivial Pursuit will never not be fun to me. And I love the fact that you can get like different versions. Like I grew up with the Disney one, but you can play, you know, my dad likes the American history one, or there's like the more general one, or there's pop culture ones. Like, you know, Jacob is the self-proclaimed trivia master. Trivia is just a good time, so it's fun to find like what your group of friends or family are into and do trivia based around that. But I think that's always timeless.
I love a lot of the games that you mentioned, and timeless is not necessarily bad. Sometimes timeless is timeless because
they're classics for a reason.
They're classics. I'm gonna quickly go through some quick hits that the starter games, if you will. Has anyone here played Sura before? Sura is a game where everyone plays a dragon, and essentially you have a grid in front of you, and you put tiles down. And as you put tiles down, your little dragon pebble will essentially travel along the paths that are on the individual tiles. And so your goal is to stay on the board, stay in the sky as a dragon as long as possible, and letting the other dragons through your placement of tiles go off the board. It is a great starter game that I actually discovered at PAX, and if you go to a PAX, you can see the giant versions of this. Like you can play like a 10-foot wide version of this game, and it's wild. We love Sushi Go in this house. Same thing with like Go Nuts for Donuts, which is essentially just like a little, deck builder. It's not like a Dominion where you essentially get like magic cards and you have to build your magic deck throughout. It is literally like, hey, there's some donuts. Or, hey, I said Go Nuts for Donuts and Sushi Go. There's Sushi Go and there's donuts, and you just have to score based on the cards that you're collecting. One of them has a like bidding system, Go Nuts for Donuts, where you essentially say, I want this donut. And if multiple players say, hey, I want that donut, nobody gets the donut. But if you uniquely say, I want this specific donut, you collect the donuts, you get points. Sushi Go is kind of similar, except you have hands and you're passing them sort of counterclockwise or clockwise. And then you sort of pick the best sushi plate from the cards that you're given and passed. Some great starters. And then another tile game I'll mention really quickly is Queen Domino. Queen Domino is one that it kind of reminds me a little bit of Catan in that you just are placing different types of terrain, and those different types of terrain, based on how you place them, get you points. So let's say you line up 5 grasses or 5 like bricks, whatever. You just get more points based on the way you're placing them. So Sura, Sushi Go, Go Nuts for Donuts, Queen Domino. Asa, you got any more hardcore games you want to talk about here? I know we talked about some easy ones, some staples.
Not hardcore ones, but just other ones that I love.
Yeah.
Flux. I don't know if anybody's played Flux.
I've seen Flux.
Flux, yeah.
Flux is a good one. It's another one of those kind of like super fight where it's made for. My favorite one is Flux Firefly. But the rules get made up as you go along. It's a like deck building game. It's a lot of fun. Everdell is another great one, playing as woodland creatures. It's like a good mixture of the game that you had just talked about, Jacob. I'm sorry, it's already out of my mind. And then a little bit of Catan, the one where you're putting the tiles of like
Queen Domino.
Yes. So like you're collecting wood pieces. It's a lot of management of your little village, and who can be the most prosperous one. And it's cute, and they have a million expansions now. It's been great to see them kind of exploding. But those are 2 that I think are really cool.
Hoopman.
Yeah.
What else you got?
I actually do have a couple more. There's one called, and the name is like slipping my mind right now. And maybe as I describe it, somebody will help jog my memory. So this one's like kind of Robin Hood based, and essentially there's somebody who plays like a warden, and the warden card gets passed around the table, and basically whoever is the warden at that moment is like the goods inspector. So essentially everybody is like merchants of different sorts, and your goal is to basically sell as many goods as you can and make as much profit while also passing inspections. And the interesting part about that is like there's also a little bit of social deduction there where there are like there's contraband goods that are worth a lot of money to sell, but you're technically not allowed to sell them. So essentially you have like this little bag, this little pouch, and you put all of your goods that you want to sell in the bag. And the warden has the choice to inspect each bag every round, right? So Luke, I take your bag, you have 2 cheeses in there, 2 breads. All right, you're good to go. Take your bag back, you can go sell that. But Jacob might want to sell a crossbow, all right? And crossbows illegal, all right? But worth a lot of money. So Jacob could say, hey, here's my goods. Here's a little five coin piece on top of the pouch just for you. And then maybe that's a little sign as the warden that like, hey, maybe I should let this one go. Maybe I should look the other way about what's in this pouch. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it becomes really fun. And I'll figure out the name after I'm done talking about this, but like it becomes fun because I feel like whenever I play this with friends, we very quickly get into the role playing mindset where it's like, please, sir, please, I'm just trying to feed my family. Please, no need to look in my bag. And it's like, yeah, you got like 10 crossbows and 10 alcohols in here, sir. What kind of family are you trying to feed? So that's a great one. And like I said, I'll give you the name. Oh, it's called Sheriff of Nottingham. There you go. It just came on my Sheriff of Nottingham. I love it. And it's a little complicated in terms, it's not like, all right, you're going to jump in within 2 or 3 minutes. But I feel like even with like new crews or like kind of like casual board game players, that's one that always hits it out of the park and like people are happy to learn the rules and play. So shout out Sheriff of Nottingham.
That one's another one
really
you want to
jump into?
Sorry, me?
No, I was going to say Hoopman. Did you have yet another one that you were...
I mean, how long you got? I got Azul, which is more kind of like a strategy game. That one's, I think if you go to any board game shop, you'll see.
I feel like I know I can picture that cover.
Yeah.
It's very,
it kind of looks like
it kind
of looks like a window stained art piece. It's kind of like what the box looks like. That one's always great. Munchkin, another one is kind of like mini
Munchkin's
role playing. Yeah, you get your little. I have a Adventure Time Munchkin, which is a blast. It's a little hard to play because you kind of like to get the maximum fun out of it. You need 4 people to have like the full squad, but that one's fantastic. And yeah, those are the ones that are coming to mind. I got a pretty extensive board game collection. If you guys don't know Werewolf, come on, Werewolf is another fantastic one.
I have Secret Hitler, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Exactly.
Resistance.
Genre too.
Those are like the pre-Among Us games before Among Us came out, you know. So,
There's something really fun about playing that type of game in person, though, too, because it's you're literally sweating. I can see, you can suss it out a little more, which makes it that much more fun.
The only time my partner really got to know how well I could lie was playing Secret Hitler. And we were not good after that night of Secret Hitler where I lied to her face, but we're good now. So,
good.
Has anyone played Spyfall?
No.
Mm-mm.
I watched the like Corridor Crew introduced me to it on YouTube. I used to watch it all the time. That's a good one.
Spyfall is a really good one. It kind of blends the whole like tabletop gaming like spaces because you play it with your phone. You know, you go into the browser and you get jumped into a location, but then it tells you like who's the spy, and you know, and if you're not the spy, it just says like you have a job. And so basically it's that social deduction of going around asking questions, just the spy's trying to figure out where you are. And everyone else is trying to suss out who is the spy by like asking these questions of like, hey, we're on a cruise ship. You know, hey, the other day, did you get seasick? Like just asking questions like that, trying to figure out if the person really knows where you're at. That's a really good one. And then I have to talk about Power Rangers just about everywhere I go, but Heroes of the Grid. There's a Power Rangers tabletop RPG akin to like D&D, but then there's Heroes of the Grid, which is like you have this board, you're just protecting the city, monsters are coming in, and you team up with your ranger buddies to defend the city. And so you've got cards to build your swords and stuff like that. So another really good one.
That sounds sick.
I've got two for us, and I think that's probably all I got. I have and they're ones that I've discovered in the last 5 years. If y'all like F1, there's a board game called Downforce, which is relatively new, where it's a multiple phase game where you play it with up to I believe 5 people is the max, where you first bid on your car. So essentially there'll be an auction for the cars to be like, how much money are you going to spend? And then there's the race, and then based on how you place in the race, and your bid, that kind of determines like prize pool minus how much you bid for the car determines sort of your score. And sometimes depending on the number of players, you could have more than one vehicle. So really like in F1 fashion, like you could be, the head of 2 teams, and those scores together kind of make you win. But that one, then there's like powers that you can use on the actual race. You play cards, you don't roll dice. So you're like, hey, I want to advance this many spaces for these colors, but also sometimes your cards will affect the placements of other racers. So that's a wild one I discovered at PAX Unplugged, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, before the pandemic, the last Unplugged before the pandemic. And then one that I recently played was Planted, which is sort of a plant game where you decide certain plants to put on your shelf, and then you sort of every turn collect resources that will then help you generate sunshine from your plants.
Yeah.
It's super rad.
I think I've heard of that game.
Yeah, and it's got great pieces to it. It's, the games that have like a million tokens and little gibbets. Like this one just has the best tokens and shit that you put in bowls, and it's fun. Planted.
Yeah. I just heard about this game like a couple months ago. It looks so good. Yeah.
Highly recommend that one. We're wrapping things up here, so I guess I'd love to go around maybe one more time and just do a speed round of anything else y'all want to chat through. Luke, you haven't spoken in a while, so do you have any more you want to throw in there?
Sure. I don't have any more recommendations, but I have kind of a question request for the group. So something I'm looking for in the board game world is a really good 2-player game that maybe can scale up to more players, but is still really fun with just 2 players. Because Claire and I struggle to get a group of 5 or 6 people over to our place on a regular basis to play a game. So what's something that's like a little more involved than a card game for 2 folks, maybe more?
Yeah.
I turned to Asa because I feel like you got games for days, but we can think on that while people are throwing out other recommendations. But I wanted to throw that one out there before we wrap up.
I also have a question I want to throw out while we're thinking about that.
Sure.
Are there any board games from your childhood that stand out? Like, what was that game? Or like, that was just such a random game we used to play? Because I think about one game in particular, a little game called Mousetrap. And I remember looking at the commercials of like the Rube Goldberg machines. I'm like, oh my God, I have to get that game. And I remember I got the game and I'm like, I don't even remember the rules. I just remember there was just a bunch of stuff on the board. I'm like, this is sick. But the actual core rules of the game, who knows what that was?
Yeah,
exactly.
And,
exactly.
We were playing the game. We were like, it was a toy. But yeah, I remember that
exactly.
too. I was thinking of a random card game I remember playing a ton as a kid with my cousins called Set. Y'all ever play Set?
Oh, Amanda introduced me to that recently.
It's like shapes and colors. There's like green, red, and purple shapes of different sizes and numbers. And then you're trying to like match and like count upwards. And it's kind of like if you ever played like the card game BS, where you're like trying to get rid of cards as fast as possible to like complete the set. But that was a fun one as a kid. And that's one that you can play with like a bigger group or a duo. Effectively.
That's like me in the old school game Milborn. It's a French board game. Milborn.
I was gonna say that sounds Canadian.
Yeah, it's from France, I think. But essentially, with that one, you have cards, and this is a game from the 50s that was then like repopularized in the 2000s, where you are playing. It's about speeding, and essentially you are playing like speeds, and at the same time you're trying to actively hamper other players' cars by be like, you have a flat tire, and in order to like fix the flat tire, you have to get a card that fixes a flat tire in order to like continue to go. And it's really just like, who can hit the target score. And that's an old school game that I just started playing again in the 2000s.
Interesting.
Yeah. Did y'all play Liar's Dice ever? Like after it was popularized in Red Dead Redemption?
I don't know if that one.
Not
I know what you're talking about,
outside
but
of
I
Red
didn't.
Dead Redemption.
Yeah,
But
I would play it outside. So my friends were sickos in first year university, end of high school, where we created our own Liar's Dice set, where essentially you get the cup
Wow.
like in Liar's Dice, and underneath it it's 5 dice, and you essentially say like, how many 5s do you think are there around the table? And it's not only your 5 dice, but it's all the players around you's 5 dice as well. So you're essentially doing like the bidding, almost like you would when you play euchre, and you would bid and say how many 5s you think are around the whole table. If there's 4 players, there's 20 dice. So you're essentially doing a little bit of lying to say like, if I have 2 5s, there's probably other 5s around the table. Therefore, let's say there's 5 5s around the table. And then folks either have to raise the number on the dice or raise the number of dice. And you get into a point where like, hey, it's actually physically impossible for there to be 11 5s on this table. So bullshit. And then like you lose a dice if you lie, and it's whoever has dice left over who's the winner. That's when we just sort of made our own homemade version of it, and it's rad.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
Any childhood games or 2-player games, Asa, for Luke?
Yeah. Luke, I'm gonna have to get back to you because there's
okay.
one game in particular. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it essentially is like a dungeon crawler where you collect your cards. So there are like cards that you pull for your person, like whether it be like, a rucksack or a rusty sword or something like that. But then you have dungeon cards. So it's trying to get through the dungeon, get the loot, and get out. But every time
Boss Monster?
I think that's it. I think it's Boss Monster. Where you put down the cards and it changes the direction of the monsters that come up, and then the direction, the traps within the dungeon. That's a really good one, a fun one to do side by side.
Okay.
And then if somebody knows the name of this game, I would love to know. This
Boss Monster, this one?
Yes, okay. That's it.
There you go.
That's a really fun one. For a childhood game, if somebody knows what this game is, I would love for you to tell me. All I remember is there was this giant castle that you had in the middle of the board, and it would go around, and it came with these like sick 70s, 80s, like dark fantasy pieces. They were maroon in color, and I don't even remember what the point of the game was. I just stole the figures from the box because I thought they were so cool. And then I took the castle, and then I stole that as well because I was like, wow, look at that thing. So we were never able to play the game because I just hoarded all that stuff.
Nice.
But yeah. And shout out to Mousetrap. I actually just bought that from Target the other day to introduce tabletop gaming to my kids. It's literally right there.
Nice.
Love it.
Luke, I like Dominion a lot, but that is a box. Basically, like you buy Magic the Gathering in one box, and you can take different cards out of it, and you are essentially every turn gathering gold to buy cards that then allow you to gather victory points to win.
Yeah, it's great.
And
That
there's
sounds
like
fun.
10 different sets that you can end up buying, but the core Dominion is pretty good.
Okay. Nice.
Another like a very, very casual game you can play that Amanda introduced me to is called Spot It. It's like a little 10 of cards, and basically it's like a speed game where you have like these cards face down, you flip them over, and you have to find what the similarity on the two cards is, and the first person to point it out like wins that set. And it's, first of all, it's crazy because you have all these cards and you're like, there's no way there's something similar on these two random cards, but there always is. So it's like designed expertly in that regard. But yeah, it's also just really, really fun for two people.
Nice. That sounds awesome. Cool.
Any other recos, either of games that you pull back from your childhood or games for Luke? Unless we do, then I'm closing us off for this episode.
Close us off.
I'll give one shout out from one more shout out because this is a weird one. Do y'all play Cranium? Any of the Cranium games as a kid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember, like,
dried.
Yeah, but I was just gonna point out that you're making stuff in clay. You're doing charades. You're moving pieces around. The pieces like interconnected. and look like nuclear atoms or something. Fun game. A lot of variety there. That's all I got.
Shout out to Cranium.
We have lots of board game recommendations. Too bad y'all can't play with us in person. But you can do 3 things for this program if you love us. The first thing is follow us on BlueSky at crossplay. Oh, I don't know how to do this. Crossplay.bsky.social.
Just say it.
Do you need all of that?
Search it.
If you search at Crossplay Convos, it's the same handle. You'll get there.
You'll get there. You'll find us. Send this podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts. And give us a review on your podcasting platform of choice because it really helps. Before we close off, Asa, we're going to share out information about your board game when it's available. But if folks want to find you on the internet and they haven't done so already, where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So BlueSky X, if you want to go there, but and TikTok, just search A Greenriver. I don't know if the 07's on there, but A Greenriver, and you should find me. And then of course, I'm just going to put it out into the universe now. Just go ahead and subscribe to youtube.com/Borderline Entertainment and twitch.tv/Borderline Entertainment, because I know that the universe is going to provide me with the PC parts that I need to get back into the content game for real. And then we had talked about merch at the top of the show. You can, I don't know the link, but if you, I'll post something soon, maybe perhaps on BlueSky. You can buy Gaming's Tribal Chief merch. And there is going to be a new set of the GTC merch coming out specifically for Native American Heritage Month, because I am Indigenous. So if you want to support Indigenous people, absolutely you should. I'm one of them, so I would love your support. But the new merch that's going to be dropping towards the end of the month, and it's going to be on the National Day of Mourning, it's going to be real sick. I love this new design. It's real classy. I'm not going to say anything else because I just want you all to see it.
Well, again, we'll link to all of this in the doodly doo, as Joe Grote would say, so you can find it there. Anything you guys want to promote, either Joseph or Luke, before I close this out?
I got a quick one.
Yeah.
As of this recording going live, we did a off the beaten path episode of Lukewarm Games where we read video game related Reddit stories and discussed them. So Claire and I went down a rabbit hole of Reddit story podcasts recently, mostly like wedding planning, dating advice, am I the asshole type posts. And we found them really entertaining. And we were like, how do we do our own version of this without making it the entire podcast? So we're doing a fun one-off video game Reddit story episode. So check that out. It's a fun time.
Sounds like you've started a new tradition on the Lukewarm Games podcast.
We'll see how people respond to it, but we had fun putting it together. Claire hosted this one, which is a fun change of pace for us. So yeah, check it out.
Hootman?
Nothing pressing. Like, you can always go over to Player Pod. We're always doing crazy stuff over there. I don't even know what we talked about recently. Like all sorts of. We went down a crazy rabbit hole last weekend about this mango viral TikTok video. Then we started talking about Angry Orange and Fred. It was just a whole thing. So go check that out. And then we also talk about video games too. So yeah, go listen to us for video game content as well. But that's basically all right now.
I know in the last episode, Luke promoted for you the Vegas episode that you did where you talked through all of your stories. I would also highly recommend that one. So
it's
there's
very
your double
good.
reco.
It's very good content. Yeah, that's funny.
Crazy times.
Before we close, I'd briefly love to say that I've got a brand new review up at thegamingbrief.ca. It's for Critical Reflexes' new joint. This is Threshold from Julien Eveillé.
Wait, that game is out?
As of recording, it is out. Yes. So prepare your butts. Weird cargo trains are afoot. The TLDR on that is I enjoyed it. So you'll find my impressions of that game at thegamingbrief.ca. And my friends, that's our episode for today. So with that, I will leave you with, don't be bored, play a board game. Goodbye.